how can we keep that fire burning through the roller coaster ride of menopause?
Cultivating that pleasure is a huge piece. And then also starting to embrace the wisdom and power of this phase, learning about my sexuality, healing my past sexual wounds, really understanding what made my body tick, and finding my own pleasure.
So, how can we reconnect with our partners in a way that doesn't feel like another to do thing?
These are powerful tools for increasing our energy, our self love, and cultivating that radiant presence.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Hot Flash Health Podcast, where we're dishing out unfiltered truths about menopause with a side of sass and a sprinkle of crass. Get ready to dive into the wild world of hot flashes, mood swings, and all the other joys of being a queenager. This ain't your grandma's podcast. We're here to chat about our bodies, our passions, our fears, and desires, all while navigating the roller coaster ride of menopause. Grab a glass of wine or three. Kick back and let's ride this hot flash wave together. I'm Courtney Mamusha. Alongside is my fabulous co-host, Dawn Fable. We are just two outspoken gals who aren't afraid to say it like it is. And because menopause is not just another chapter of life, we're here to help you write it the way you want. Now let's kick off today's episode. Dawn, why don't you go ahead and introduce today's amazing guest?
Now, for anyone who knows me, you have to know that this is one of the most exciting podcasts we have done. So I am so happy to introduce the one and only Amanda Testa. She is your go-to expert for unlocking pleasure, confidence, and deep connection in the bedroom. As a trusted healer, coach, and fierce advocate for women's empowerment, Amanda has worked her magic on hundreds of clients, helping them heal their relationship with sexuality, embrace pleasure shamelessly, and own our own sexy confidence like a queen. With Amanda, her masterful coaching skills, her somatic trauma resolution, and pleasure embodiment techniques, Amanda is all about guiding you and us here at Hot Flash Health to deeply connected, sizzling relationships, whether you're with yourself or your partner. When Amanda is not leading her amazing transformative session, she's living life to the fullest, snuggling with her spunky 12-year-old, flirting with her sexy hubby, which I need to find out how to do better, playing in nature, jamming out at live shows, or having epic chats about sex on the Find Your Feminine Fire podcast. So get ready to ignite your inner fire with this powerhouse, and we are so happy to have you, Amanda. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me and for that beautiful intro. Thank you. Thank you.
And you're adorable, and you look like a sex goddess.
Thank you. I will tell you, I've been doing this work for over a decade now, and really part of it is the practices that I do that keep me feeling juicy as we age and go through all the fun waves that we're riding during this transition, right?
There are some waves. Speaking of riding some waves, like, why don't we start with libido, the hot topic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. How can we keep that fire burning through the roller coaster ride of menopause?
Yes. And I like how you say, like, not the fire of the hot flashes, because those aren't the most enjoyable at times, but the fire of your sexual your sexual aliveness and your libido. And, there's so many different factors at play when we talk about libido, as I'm sure we'll talk about, because it is a big important part of it. But also, as you've talked with previous guests, it's around the quality of our relationships and our body image and our confidence and overall health and well-being, all the things. But there are some things that we can do to keep our libido humming during this time. And my wheelhouse, the things I really love to talk about, are kind of holistic ways that we can do this through, first of all, understanding what it means to kind of light our feminine fire and to get that energy moving. And when it comes to libido and energy, one of the things that I have studied a lot and that I really value is the Taoist philosophy of our sexual energy as our life force energy. It is our aliveness. It is, and just everyone has it simply by being alive, right? So people might feel like, oh, that's all. That has sailed, that is long gone, and it can feel like that at times. But and not everyone. And I just want to normalize too. Some people are happy where they are, and they don't really care about getting their libido activated. But if that's something that you do want, what I love about our sexual energy is this something that we can learn to work with and activate. And if that is a desire for you, the more we can cultivate that, there's practices that we can actually do that aren't that hard, that can cultivate that energy so that it is easier for us to feel in the mood, that it is easier for our bodies to feel more sensation, that there are ways to, keep the blood flowing to our pelvic floor and to our genitals so that we have more blood flow, so that there's less pain and more sensation and all of those good things. So, I'm really a big fan of doing exercises around our sexual fitness, I will call it. That's my secret key to the libido. Yes.
Well, we'll have to learn more about those exercises because I'm sure all of our listeners would love to take advantage of those. I certainly would as well.
Now, I thought it was just a bottle of tequila. No.
Lifting, drinking.
That can help. If that is one of the things that reduces your stress, like there's the litmus test of how, like a little bit can be great. Sometimes a little much cannot be great, but it depends, right? Depends on a lot of different factors.
Totally.
Yes.
No, you're so right. Here at Hot Flash Health, we have 5 pillars that we have really recognized that are prevalent in this menopausal journey. And one of those pillars is the sexual wellness. So obviously our bodies are changing a lot during menopause and certainly throwing us for many loops. Unfortunately, sex is one of those topics that has really been surrounded by shame and stigma. And we as women, I think, have had a really difficult time sort of embracing the sexy sags and curves without letting it affect our relationship. So do you have any advice on, one, how we can increase the prevalence of this stigmatized topic and talk more openly about sex? And 2, how we as women, especially going through this hormonal change, can get more comfortable with our sexual beings and find that sexual energy?
Yes, this is such a great question because it is not easy to embrace our changing bodies during menopause and during this transition of moving through the stages. And it can be hard. And especially one of the things that I see happen a lot with my clients at this stage is that previous things that may have happened start to bubble up, right? This is a big time where we are revisiting our past, or maybe we're at the point where things that we used to settle for, we're done with that. And our hormones are changing, so there is sometimes a bit of distance and not having that desire to connect in the same way. But one of the things that I think is really important with regards to our body image, first of all, because that can be a huge thing that holds us back from sex, right? When we're not feeling good about our body, I'm like, well, of course I don't want to get on top because then my belly sags and my boobs and my partner's like holding them up and it does not feel very sexy, right? Because we're like up in this part of our brain, judging ourselves and criticizing ourselves, and that's no fun. But we all can do it at times, right? So first of all, compassion. Compassion for yourself. But we have to kind of look at some of those, for me, and I'm noticing this a lot, even the difference between 45 and 51. And I'm sure people that are older listening are like, you're only 51, you better shut your mouth. You have zero idea. But it just, every year, there's different things that we embrace. And part of that is kind of realizing our own internalized ageism about what are the things that I've been taught as beautiful my whole life. And our culture definitely does not teach us that. Anything that is not youthful is alive. And I saw something the other day. I wanted to punch this person, famous biohacker person, talking about if a woman doesn't have estrogen, then you're just not going to be attracted to them. And I'm like, this is probably why you're divorced. But those are some of the narratives that we hear. So it becomes internalized, like, oh, when I start losing my beauty, then, is my husband still going to desire me, or my partner still going to want to be with me? And are they going to leave me for like the 22-year-old, whatever, right? Those are the thoughts that my clients tell me they think. And I sometimes think those too, right? So it's kind of, first of all, looking at what are the thoughts that we are thinking and challenging those, right? If we see things we don't like about us in the mirror, can we be a little compassionate to that? Like if it was your best friend and they're telling you, oh, I just can't even stand looking at my neck in the mirror. You're like, listen here, you have a beautiful neck and I love you no matter what, right? That's not always easy to do for ourselves, but it's kind of like changing those narratives that we have. So yep. Byron Katie, she's a pretty famous spiritual teacher that she has this, and it's all free online. It's called The Work. But basically there's these questions that you ask yourself to turn around your thoughts. And it can be really powerful when it comes to aging to look at some of our thoughts and kind of turn those around. So for example, if you are saying, for me, my neck is my one that right now is not my favorite, that I'm learning to love. And my daughter affectionately calls it my giblet, and she loves to like grab it. And I remember doing that to my grandmother too. Sorry, Gran. But it's like, okay, what am I saying about this thing? And what do I not like about it? And then realizing, is it true? And in whose eyes is it true? Maybe it's true in my mind, but is it objectively true? Maybe, maybe not. Because when I look back at older pictures, I probably look the same, but it's just something I'm noticing now, right? What happens when I believe that thought? Well, when I believe that thought, I feel pretty shitty about myself, right? I'm not feeling confident. I'm not feeling good about myself. And that affects every area of my life. And so then if you like could turn the thought around into something that feels more supportive, like it's not my neck is ugly, but it's like my thought is ugly, right? It's not my neck, it's my thought.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, I'm not doing the best job of explaining it, but it's just kind of asking those questions. Is it true? How do you know? And what happens when you believe those thoughts? Because when we can just even stop ourselves from that negative inner voice and then focus on something else that maybe feels good, like feeling good in our body is such a big way to combat that negative self-talk, because often no matter what, our bodies are going to change and they're going to transition, but we can feel good. We can connect to something that feels good. So for example, maybe I'm looking at that and I'm feeling these thoughts. I could pause and say, okay, well, let me just turn things around. If I could just take a breath or two and notice in my body, is there a sensation in my body that might feel pleasant or neutral or maybe even good? Can I think about that for a minute?
I love that. And before we hop into the next question, I think it's really important for all of us to acknowledge, because I find myself doing this a lot, and all of us with daughters, is how that negative self-talk is impacting how they are perceiving themselves, especially in a deeply judgmental society. And so I'm certainly not perfect at it, but I've tried to be very mindful of what I'm saying, not only to myself out loud, but in front of my daughter, because of the example that I'm setting. No wonder there's so much self-shame, is look how we're all fucking self-shaming our own selves, right? Court, with your daughter being in sort of the beauty and modeling community, that's something that's very real. But thank you, Amanda, for bringing that to our attention. I think that's a really important thing for all of us to acknowledge.
I get stuff like, are you done with your meal? And she's like, are you fat shaming me? I'm like, what? No. It's funny, the terminology now. I'm like, what? And when they're saying, yeah, you're eating, I'm like, are you eating or you look good? I don't know what's happening. Anyways, we can go into terminology for years. Amanda, one of the things that like I love and been fortunate to actually have you come to my house and do a session. And I love your brand. It's all about, feminine fire. And for all of us out there who feel like we're burning up from hot flashes, that's not at all what she's talking about and promoting. So I really wanted to dive into that topic a little more of like why you started this, what this means to you, and maybe give some ideas of how we can all take, a few steps to ignite what's inside us.
Yeah. So my journey first began when my daughter was a baby. And I just found myself, that's another huge transition. Like these are some of the huge transitions when you have a baby, when you're transitioning into menopause, like these are some of the huger transitions in life. And at that time, I just remember feeling so disconnected from myself. And I was doing all the quote unquote right things, right? I was involved in my community. I was taking care of myself, but I had zero connection with myself when I looked in the mirror. And I remember one morning just like super resentful, kicking over toys, going into the bathroom and looking at myself in the mirror and just being like, this cannot be my life. And I just vowed at that moment to do whatever I could to find myself again. And through that work, I started finding one of my mentors, which when I first took this class, it was something I don't even know how I found it, probably on the internet, around, spicing things up in the bedroom, which anyone that has a new baby can attest that area can use some help. But when I started doing the work, I realized that was only a sliver of what it was about. It was about connecting to my own body, learning about my sexuality, healing my past sexual wounds, really understanding what made my body tick, and finding my own pleasure and centering that first and foremost. And that radically transformed my whole life. Because even with my husband, we had been together quite a few years at that point, and I just thought I had opened my heart to him. I thought that we had a pretty good sex life, but I realized that I was only like a fraction. My heart was only a fraction of the way opened. And so it just really was life-changing. And through that, I started realizing like we all have access to this fire. Some call it, Shakti. It's this aliveness. And there's ways you can connect to it, right? And so I have some simple steps that you can use. And I can share a little bit about that. So the first one is really kind of like remembering what you desire. We so often, as busy women and moms and caregivers, this middle life is the hardest time because often you're caring for elderly or aging or sick parents. You're moving through transitions there. You have younger ones maybe that you're taking care of. Or maybe you're moving into an empty nest situation. There's a lot of different things that can be happening. So it's hard to put yourself in even remember what you want. But staying connected to our desires is kind of that compass that lets us know, all right, am I living my life in alignment? And I feel like when we're at this stage of life, we have a lot less tolerance for BS. And we can actually realize maybe for the past 20 years, I have not taken care of myself, but I'm going to do it right now. And I'm going to start. So that's the first thing. And then, I really love the embodying of your sexuality and your sensuality. Because when we can reconnect to our body through mindful touch and movement, even just simple things, right? The texture of your skin, enjoying that, the rhythm of your breath, little things like that, harnessing our cyclical nature. This is a big thing. And it can be hard when we move into this season if we've used our menstrual cycle as a way to monitor. It's irregular, it's confusing. So I like to use the moon or seasons.
Well, those really, have no idea our menstrual cycles.
Yeah.
My boobs hurt. That's about it.
It's so hard.
So moon sounds better for me.
Yeah. I mean, I love it because even this past few months, I'm like, is it going to come or is it not? Oh, it's here. Oh, it's gone. Oh, wait, it's back. Right? And cultivating pleasure as a practice. So making it a non-negotiable part of your daily life. And this is where it goes beyond sexual pleasure. That's important too. But it's just finding the way in. I have what I call a pleasure palette that I work with clients on. And we kind of figure out what's your road in? Because we all have different ways. But when we can incorporate those things into our daily life, not only do we feel better, it is very nourishing to our nervous system to have those resources that we connect to again and again. So we have more capacity to deal. We have more compassion for ourselves when we might lose it. Thanks to the hormonal shifts. So cultivating that pleasure is a huge piece. And then also starting to embrace the wisdom and power of this phase. Because, oftentimes people say when we move into menopause after that first year, then you're in your second spring. That's what the Taoist philosophy says. And I really love that. Your second spring. But there's different, depending on the lineage or where you've learned, there's different phases. And so the crone happens a little bit later, but there's this magical time, like the queen time, that you always talk to where you go between the maiden and the mother. Then there's the queen and then the crone, right? So there's so much wisdom and power in really honoring the wise women years. Right?
I love that so much, Amanda, because one of the things that we've coined here at Hot Flash Health is the term queenager. And I think although menopause can present itself as a challenging time in our lives, there's very much also an awakening that's happening within us. And we're setting boundaries and we're treating ourselves more like queens and we're investing and we really know what we want in life. So thank you for making that reference. You've spoken a lot about sort of the inner dialogue that we have with ourselves to help our sensuality and sort of sexual confidence. But in terms of libido boosters, actual exercises or products that we can use or things that we can do, what are some of your go-tos for women to really reclaim our sexual vitality?
This is such a great question. One of my favorite tools is to figure out a way for your own body and for your own being that you enjoy to cultivate a sensual self-care practice, right? Because when we think about our overall health and wellness, we think about going to the gym for our body, right? Or working out or walking or whatever it is, but we don't often add in our sexual health to that mix. Most of us never think about that. I never did until I started doing this work. That would never be something I think about. But like anything, it's a muscle that we can use and that we can work. And so when we can figure out these sensual self-care rituals, these are powerful tools for increasing our energy, our self-love, and cultivating that radiant presence, that energy that when you walk into a room and people are like, ooh, I like that. I want some of that. And so if you want, I can share a little bit of what that might look like.
We love it.
And again, we don't always have a lot of time, so we can expand or contract on this depending on our time, right? And sometimes when we're first learning something new, we might need to spend a little more time on the front end, just teaching ourselves these practices, learning our body, learning what feels good, learning what we like, and then we can do it in longer or shorter times. But what I typically like to do is weave things into our busy schedule that we're already doing. Because for many of us, we already are busy. We don't have a lot of extra time. But one of my easiest ones that I love is when I'm taking a shower. I really view this as an opportunity to be like a sensual gift to myself. So when I get into the shower, right, it's like making sure your space is how you like it. If there's dirty clothes or towels on the floor, just like throw them out of there, close the door, make it feel nice, lock it, and just take a breath like, oh, this is my own fucking space. Praise the good Lord, right? And then I will really luxuriate in the process. So enjoying the feel of the water, enjoying the smell of whatever I'm using, and really massaging my body with love. And here is where my sensual self-care tip comes in, is I do a breast massage. Because one of the beautiful things, a breast or a chest massage, is a beautiful thing to do because it is, in the Taoist philosophy, again, our chest is connected to our heart. So it's a heart opener, as well as there is so much good energy we can cultivate in this practice. So I'll share really a super abbreviated version of it, but you can just start by exhaling on and kind of like massaging down on the outside. So up on the inside of the breast, down the outside. And this is also really healing if you've had a mastectomy on the skin, just to like really feel the connection of this part of you, because you still have the energetic space if you don't have any physical organs or parts of your body that you're working with. So again, this is when you can just like clear out, even if you just take a couple breaths and like clear out all the heaviness that you're holding, all the stuff that's been weighing you down, just like let it go down the drain. And then you can switch and you'll go up on the inside of the breast and out, down on the outside. So this is bringing in. So when you're bringing in, you think you're bringing in, what are the qualities you want to bring into your heart? What do you want to feel? Maybe what are the qualities you want to bring into your sensuality? Maybe it's like aliveness or freshness or vitality or pleasure, whatever it is. And then you can just take a few breaths this way, and then just notice how you feel. And if you have more time, maybe spend a little more time, but you're already in the bathroom, you're already naked. And this is a way we can just kind of embrace our body, be loving to it, accept it for what it is, even if it's not what it once was. And really just be in the now with it, be in the present moment, finding the pleasure and the sensation that you feel. Because the breast can be extremely orgasmic. And after breastfeeding, I could feel nothing. I remember I could like stab myself with my fingernails, partly because, thanks biology, we don't want a toddler nurse or like the baby nursing and picking and all the things. So it comes back and it can be very pleasurable, is the point. So little things like that are ways we can incorporate that in.
I love that. And not only are you giving yourself breath work, really going into that moment, you're also checking for lumps, which is
exactly.
Really...
Yeah, you can feel for any abnormalities then. Exactly.
Yes, right, Don?
I might
Yeah,
be petrified that my husband, if he saw me doing something like that, he would like get into the shower as soon as possible, because he'd be like, holy shit, what is going on in there? Like, I need to hop in and take advantage of whatever she is doing.
That's an invitation.
Yeah.
This is back to the door locking.
Oh.
This is back to the door locking, because this is for you and you alone. And then maybe you feel like, okay, maybe I want to unlock the door and invite him in now. Or maybe I don't, but I get to pick. But yeah. Like
thinking about the partners, right? Because, they're always there and we have to, somehow pull them in. And I know, for me, menopause can make intimacy feel like a chore, right? So it's like, oh, I've got to get this done. I got to do this. And this is another thing on my to-do list. So how can we reconnect with our partners in a way that doesn't feel like another to-do list item?
Yes. And I will go back one more second to those sensual self-care practices, because the more you do those, then it's not like you're going from 0 to 60, right? When you're constantly like doing something that makes you feel good in little ways, it opens your sensory system more, so that if your partner and maybe you have a desire to connect and maybe you want to, it often takes longer for us to get turned on. And on a good day, for most women, it takes up to 45 minutes for your body to be fully engorged. Did many of us ever take time for that? No. And so often if we've had 20 years of sex that happened before our body was fully ready, there might be pain. And then the additional, when we are moving through perimenopause, the estrogen decreases, and so it can be painful. It can be painful for a lot of people. I really love Julva. There's a great cream by Dr. Anna Kabecka for that. Vulva regularly is amazing. And so then when you do these little things, there's more of that energy flowing, so it feels easier to get to those moments with your partner. And I think when you don't want it to feel like a chore or to do, occasionally, yes. I sometimes talk about like fast food and gourmet meals, right? Sometimes we just need to eat something quick and we might go to Chipotle. That's fine. But we don't want to eat McDonald's every day. And the more we can make time, and again, this is the hard part, finding the time. But when you value something, you create time for it. So I really feel like you have to carve out time for your partner when you can, and really honoring that as a commitment to your relationship. So when you do, maybe you just have time to connect. And you can let go of the stress of it having to be erotic or having to have sex during that time, but just time that you are going to connect. Maybe you just lay in bed and talk. And if your partner is like really hungry and always is coming at you with a hungry touch, then you can have that conversation, right? Like, I really love and adore you and I desire you. And my body is changing right now and things are different and it's challenging for me. And I want to feel connected to you and I want to still find ways to be connected sexually. But I'm wondering how it might feel for us to try some new things. Like, what ideas may sound fun for you? And then you can just even have those conversations. I've mentioned this before, but I like jars. I like just things that are tangible that you can see. And I think it can be fun for you to get with your partner and you each get a piece of paper and you write down things you think would be fun to try at some point. It could be sexual. It could be just adventurous. It could be just anything. And you each write them down and then you rip up the paper and you roll them into little scrolls and you put them in a jar. And then when you have time together, you can pull one out and then you have a rating scale, yes, no, or maybe. If this is something we both are a yes to, maybe we should try it. If one of you is like a no, we don't want to shame the other person. We want to be like, you know what, this is a no right now, but I'm wondering if there's something else that we can pick out of this jar. Maybe we'll come back to this one, or, you know, I'm not comfortable with this right now, so we'll put this one on the back burner for now. And you keep going till you find something that you're both a yes to. And if it's an activity, then you're like, oh yes, let's go to that concert. Or, oh my gosh, I've always wanted to take a road trip for the weekend and stay in a treehouse. Yes. Or maybe we could just take a walk and go get a coffee and not take the dog or the kid, right? And I think the benefit of being at this age, for not everyone, but for many of us, our kids are a little bit older and can have a little more time alone, right? Or be with themselves for longer periods of time. Babysitters are always awesome. But, you know, just what are those things? Maybe it's enjoying food together, doing a little five senses ritual where you really mindfully taste the food and feed each other, things like that. That can feel more fun, less than like, oh, now we have to do this thing. But like, what is something that I would want to do? I'm curious for y'all what comes up around that. Is there anything that comes up that you might be like, I would want to do this?
I'm just thinking my husband would put in blowjob, blowjob, blowjob.
Totally.
They're all the same.
I would love someone to cook me breakfast in bed. I would love to have a gourmet chef. I would love to hire a gourmet chef. But I think you bring up some really interesting points, Amanda, and not only connectivity around, you know, sexual desires, but perhaps just, you know, desires in our life for adventures that we're looking to do. Speaking of blowjobs, the word foreplay, I feel like, is often getting reduced to, you know, something short and quick, right, that you can do and just be done with it. What are your thoughts, Amanda, on making foreplay more of a lasting experience? And how can we incorporate this into our daily lives where, again, as Courtney said before, it's not seeming like such a chore?
This is such a good question. And it really is a big deal because so often, especially at this age, many of us have been in long-term relationships or, you know, and it's like things get routine and boring and it's just maybe not as enjoyable as it once was. And so it's really important to keep the connection playful and alive. And I really love flirting. I think there's an art to flirting that is a big part of foreplay, right? It's more that, because especially sometimes we're busy and we don't have a lot of time. I know for our family, summer is crazy and there's not a lot of camps and it's just like constant juggling of work and trying to entertain kid and, you know, spend time together. And we don't have a lot of alone time. And that can feel hard when you have periods of these winters, I call them. It's normal to have the cycles of the winter and knowing the summer will return. But if you're in something like that, finding other ways to connect, even if it's just like sending flirty notes, or maybe there's a picture of something that you did that was really fun, that you loved, and reminding yourself that you actually like this person. Sometimes it can be, I'm a very nostalgic person, so that's probably one of the reasons. But I also like when you can have conversations. I love like books like this. This one's called 1,000 Things You Don't Know About Me, but just little conversation starters, because when we've been together with someone for a long time, it can feel like there's nothing novel about this person, or I know how they're going to, I know how they're going to react. I know they're going to do this. This is going to go this way. And then, we're going to have sex. It's going to be 2 minutes. And then I'm going to be bored and not enjoy myself. And they're going to move on to the next thing. Right? That is, and I will say there is a transition period when you have different sex with your partner. There's some clunkiness in the meantime, because maybe you're finally like, you know what? I want to center my pleasure for once, and I need more time. And yes, I understand that you too want a blowjob, and I want to give you pleasure, and I want to enjoy it, though I don't always want to feel forced. There's something about that constant hunger from you that I, of course, want you and desire you, but it feels a lot at times. So I'm wondering, what could be some different ways we can come to this, right? I want us to, find ways to, what are the things that you really enjoy? And I want to learn more things about my body that I really enjoy. And that might involve some solo exploration on my part, so I feel more comfortable sharing with you. But then when I learn something fun, I'd love to share it with you. And I think when we talk about foreplay, even it's just that time of reconnecting before intimacy. So one of the things my husband and I love to do, we just love to lay in bed naked and talk. That's always a good thing to reconnect, especially if it's been a while and you've been in a winter. You're like, wow, God, I kind of feel like a virgin again. It's been so long. Or those moments, right? You're like, oh, there's cobwebs down there. What's happening? But finding ways in that feel good and having those conversations can be hard. But I think when you can use things like, oh, I was just listening to this podcast and I heard this idea about making this jar of ideas. What are your thoughts around that? Right? Not really, what do you want to do this, yes or no, but what are your thoughts around that? I know it's been a while. Maybe we could talk about how we can connect more sexually. I don't know. What are your thoughts about that? Right? And make it feel less intimidating. Often if you're driving in the car or taking a walk, coming at it at a time when both people are in a place to talk. But you can incorporate more of that foreplay experience into, again, those sensual self-care practices, upping your pleasure, allowing yourself to receive pleasure in the moments, like the pockets of peace, the pockets of pleasure you can find in your busy day. Right? I know, for example, you're about to go traveling and you do a lot of traveling. So what about when you get on the plane, you're pretty contained. Can you listen to a meditation that you really like? Or can you just allow yourself a few minutes to be? Can you...
I'm gonna rub my breasts.
Yes.
See what happens.
No one is even going to watch you. And if they did, you'd be like, want to join? Take a picture to last longer.
You will literally...
I know, I'm like, you can off.
Yeah.
Off of the plane.
Yeah. I'm just going to say the shame piece is big. I recently did a big workshop all around slaying shame because it comes up so much and it is so debilitating. And it's really kind of getting to the root of it. Even sometimes can be, I have a practice where I often will have clients just write a letter to your shame, from the voice of your shame. What is all the things that the shame wants you to know? What else does it want you to know? How are you bad? Why are you going to hell? Whatever it is, whatever it is for you. List all those things that it tells you. And then give it a minute and come back to that list. And center yourself in your wise adult self. What if this is actually true? And if I was to share this with the next generation, is this true or is it not? That can be a way, I think, that's very powerful to look at some of those beliefs. And even just writing it all down can be a liberating experience because when shame hits the light, it feels less intense.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of whether it's true or not, there are a lot of misconceptions around sexuality and intimacy during menopause. How can we address those? How can we bust those? How can we, Mythbusters? I'm sure there's kind of the top 3 that you can think of when people think about menopause and sexuality.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about it, but do you have kind of a quick summary of these are not true, people?
Well, number one, that your sexual desire disappears completely. Libido may fluctuate, but many people continue to enjoy really good sex lives. And some people even report better sex post-menopause. So I think it's really like you're doing here, educating people about libido, what they can do. And, also kind of redefining what sex looks like. It doesn't always have to look like this, penis and vagina. There can be so many ways you can come together in erotic fashion that feels good. So that would be a big one. Also, the vaginal dryness, and it's true, there can often be vaginal pain and dryness, but it's manageable, right? You can use whatever, depending on what you're feeling, you could just use lube. I always say more lube. I personally love coconut oil. That's my favorite. Not everyone does well with that, but learning for you. The Julva cream, or something, if you are doing some kind of hormone therapy, that can be supportive. Not everyone wants to do that, but if you want to, it's great. Everybody has to discover for themselves, but there's a lot of solutions available, is my point. And sometimes it's Maybe it's time to deal with some past traumas that you've never been brave enough until now, right? The other thing, the last one that I'll share, is that your orgasms can diminish over time. And I will say, one of the beautiful things about this time is you can explore different types of orgasm, and often exploring energy and your capacity for energy orgasms and full body orgasms. That is how our sexual response can evolve over time. So when we can explore and learn new things, it can be so expansive. And I love clients that I have that are like in their 80s and having the best sex of their lives. I'm telling you, I love those stories.
That's amazing. That's where I want to be when I'm 80, or even now in my later 40s.
Yeah.
I think this is awesome. I think you have so much to teach, and we're so grateful to have you here. Are there any kind of final thoughts you might have to wrap it up of how to really dig in and find that feminine fire within and, go forth and conquer that energetic thirst?
Yes. I will say, I will just give you a challenge if you're listening and you want to play along, and by all means, you don't have to. If this does not feel good to you, no means at all. But if you were just to take 21 days and try that little breast massage practice, you can do it energetically. You don't even have to touch your body. You can do it over clothes. You don't have to touch your skin if you don't want to. But notice how it would feel to just give some sensual love to yourself repeatedly over time, and notice what might shift. Because I will assure you, we often say we're too busy, we don't have time. I get it, it is hard, but if you make time for it, it actually can be relaxing and enjoyable. And then when you connect sensuality to something relaxing and enjoyable, that makes it feel like open the door to sex feeling more enjoyable. So it's like an easy doorway in to more pleasure. That will be my share there.
That sounds lovely and obtainable. And again, I can't wait to do some breast work on the plane tomorrow.
Yes.
Thank you, Amanda, for being on our podcast today. It was so informative. We loved having you. We can't wait to have you again. Again, one of our 5 pillars is sexuality. I think you hit a lot of mental awareness, physical, sexual, a lot of these things that we deal with menopause. And thank you for sharing. She's amazing. Like I said, I've had her at my house for an in-home session, but you can also find Amanda on her own podcast, Find Your Feminine Fire. So maybe one day you'll have us on yours.
Yes, would love it.
Yeah, you can also find her on her website, amandatesta.com. We will be sure to put that at the bottom of our podcast. And, above all, thank you so much for just sharing your love for women energy and how to find it again, because we're all probably feeling the same way. Like we could use a little burst of energy, right?
Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you so much again for having me. Always such a pleasure. And I love what you're doing here. It's such needed information. So thank you for sharing it.
Thank you. Well, I will say that's a wrap on today's episode. Remember, menopause may be a wild ride, but together we've got this. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Hot Flash Health. Stream and subscribe to our podcast on YouTube and Spotify, and always share your thoughts with us anytime. We love hearing from our listeners. Until next time, stay sassy, stay fabulous, and keep those hot flashes in check.